Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics need counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko, joined as always by my good buddy, board-certified psychiatrist, Dr. Issues.
Hello, everyone.
This is our 20th episode. 20 episodes in already, so that's almost 5 months, or thereabout.
Wow, that is surprising, because this doesn't seem like it's been going on that long.
No, it really doesn't. It certainly feels like it's been going on shorter. And yet, by the same token, it feels like we've been doing this forever. Like, it's one of those things. I don't know how many of you can understand this. It feels like you've been doing something forever, but it just seems like yesterday at the same time. I know those are opposing thoughts, but it works. I don't know. It makes sense in my mind.
That's okay, because those type of time paradoxes are very common in comics, and we're definitely going to talk about them again today.
Yes, we definitely are. So before we get into that, as always, you can find our shows on our website, capesonthecouch.live. Through the Libsyn network, you can download this on Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, and the iHeartRadio app. We have a Facebook page, facebook.com/capesonthecouch. We have a Twitter account, Capes on the Couch. Doc and I also have our own individual Twitter accounts where we try to stay somewhat active. Anthony Sitko and Doc Issues. You can email us questions, concerns, comments, what have you, at capesonthecouch@gmail.com. If you're listening to the show on iTunes or one of the other apps that allows you to rate and review, we ask that you please like, subscribe, leave a positive rating and review, because that helps other folks find the show. And we are obviously trying to expand our reach as much as possible. We have a Patreon, which ties into today's episode. At the $1 level, you can subscribe and get a shout out. At the $3 level, you can get early access to the shows, as well as access to a monthly blooper reel, which is filled with just sort of outtakes and a lot of me burping during episodes. And, you know, because I always seem to have like just a poorly timed burp. I'll be in the middle of something and just bleh.
Poorly timed or perfectly timed?
Well, yeah, 6 of one, half dozen the other. So at the $5 level, you get access to a longer uncensored version of the skit, as well as any questions that you have are guaranteed to be answered by us, which is why we always try to let you know in advance who some of our episodes are going to be about. And at the $10 level, you become a president, and that gets you the ability to dictate once a month a character that you want us to do an episode on, and we will guarantee answer any questions that you have about that character. Basically, you tell us who you want and what you want us to talk about, and that's what we do. And that's the feature of this week's episode. My buddy Matt from college has selected Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man from Marvel Comics, as his character that he wants us to address.
Does that count as cheating, because technically he's chosen multiple characters?
No, there's just the one. Well, there's a technicality, but
okay.
It's just the one.
All right, I'll let it slide.
We're only doing one issue. We're only doing one episode. I know it's about multiple characters, but it's only one issue. So, Matt, this one's for you, buddy. Jamie Madrox, created by Chris Claremont, Len Wein, John Buscema, and his debut was in Giant Size Fantastic Four #4. So he was not technically created in an X-Men comic. He was created in a Fantastic Four comic from February 1975. The thing about Jamie Madrox is he has the ability to create numerous duplicates of himself, and it's usually through kinetic force, whether it's, you know, he's hitting himself, he slams into a wall, someone punches him. He gets to the point where he can eventually do it just by snapping his fingers, and that alone is enough to create a duplicate of himself. And then he can also reabsorb those duplicates back into himself.
Okay. I'm pretty sure anyone that is just getting used to comics just had their mind blown. Thankfully, that's not our audience.
I was going to say, where are you going with this? Right. Those folks are not listening to the show. I don't know who is listening to the show, but it's not them. I know Matt is listening. So here's the interesting thing about Jamie Madrox, and I did not know this until I started doing the research on him. He is not a mutant. He's a changeling. Apparently, changelings are a subsection of people with a mutant gene, but their abilities manifest at birth rather than adolescence.
I love the fact that this led into one of the best debuts for a character I could imagine. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm not quite sure where you're going with this, or where you're going to bring this in, but I will wait. He was initially, I guess we'll go with his true backstory rather than his comic history, because we don't get his life backstory until much, much later on. He's born, and when the doctor slaps him at birth, he splits into two babies.
Okay. I am telling you, as someone that works in a hospital, that is a logistical nightmare. You have no idea how much paperwork is required, or maybe you do as an attorney, when a living being comes into this world and now you spontaneously have two. That's going to cause a lot of sleepless nights for the people that have to fill stuff out.
Yeah, that's not just like, oh, surprise, you have twins. This is just me. What? And then there was two of them. So his father, who actually ends up being a friend of Professor Xavier, creates a suit to control his powers. So along comes this guy named Damien Tryp, and he tries to convince the Madroxes to let Jamie come with him so that he can help harness his powers, and he can teach him how to control it, and so on and so forth. They refuse. Smart move by the Madroxes, because Damien Tryp, who's also a changeling, by the way, and this is where he explains that, oh, Jamie's a changeling, he's not a mutant. Tryp ends up creating a tornado that destroys the farm and kills the Madroxes. While Jamie is, I think, 13 or 14. He's a teenager at this point, but the tornado comes along, and it's implied that Damien Tryp was the one who created this tornado because, oh, you don't want to come along with me? I'll show you. I'll kill your parents, and ha ha ha. So Jamie ends up finding the Fantastic Four. He runs into Reed Richards, who we're going to do an episode on in a couple of weeks. Just sort of a little preview there. And then Reed sends him to Professor Xavier, who's like, I knew your dad. We need help. I know someone who can help you. And Professor Xavier sends Jamie to Muir Island with Moira McTaggert. So when we already discussed Moira McTaggert when we were doing the Legion episode, while he's on Muir Island, he's an assistant to Moira. He helps her with her research. He gets very close with Siryn, the daughter of Banshee, and she's going to come into play a little bit later on. So at some point, and this is where things get a little hairy with Jamie's history, and it's one of the things that makes him an interesting character, but also kind of difficult for us to discuss when we're trying to catalog his backstory. So I'm going to try and do my best. Hope you can follow along. They always say that if you can explain it to a 5-year-old, or if you truly understand the material, you can explain it to a 5-year-old and it'll make sense. I don't know that applies to us, but I'm going to do my damnedest. So at some point, one of his duplicates goes off. He says, I want to see the rest of the world. I don't want to be stuck here on Muir Island. I'm going to leave. So he basically knocks Jamie out and splits off. And he joins the Fallen Angels. And this is a group of ragtag mutants and other individuals with powers. It's like a Fagin type villain. I think the Vanisher is in charge of them. There's a woman called Ariel, and she can teleport. She can move through doors. There's a guy with telepathic lobsters. I'm not exaggerating. Gomi, I think is his name. Is Japanese for trash. He has two telepathic lobsters, Don and Bill, and one of them is green and one of them is blue. Don't ask me which one is green and which one is blue, but they're telepathic cyborg lobsters. That's the other thing. They're telepathic cyborg lobsters. I am not making this up. Swear to God, this is all true. So he meets up with this ragtag little Oliver Twist group of powered folks, and then this duplicate ends up aligning with Mister Sinister. Side note, one of the coolest names in comics. I know it's cheesy and over the top, and that's why I love it. I love Nathaniel Essex as a character, Mister Sinister. I want to put like a red diamond in my forehead. I don't know how that would.
As long as you're not trying to do massive genetic experiments and destroy all of mankind.
I make no promises. Wow. Anyway, so this duplicate goes and aligns with Mister Sinister. Then this duplicate ends up shooting another duplicate. And at this point now, what we're going to call Madrox Prime is the main Kazane, Jamie Madrox. He joins the team of X Factor, which is government sponsored. And they have this big press conference where they're like, hey, everybody, we're X Factor. We're government sponsored mutants. We know you don't trust mutants, but we're cool. Look, we've got Banshee, or we've got Siryn, and we've got Quicksilver, and we've got Strong Guy. And that's literally his name that he came up with on the spot because his name is Guido. And he's like, hey, everybody should have a Strong Guy. What's your name? Strong Guy. That's his name.
And he also is the one that becomes Madrox's best friend mainly because he wants a lot of attention. And you want to know who found that out? Doc Samson. By the way, people, I haven't done this enough. I think in the future, anytime I get to mention Doc Samson, I'm going to, because he's a psychiatrist in addition to being a superhero.
And we know you love that. Anyway, so we digress a little bit there. So there's a press conference and they're like, hey, we've got Multiple Man and Quicksilver and this is X Factor. And then this duplicate shows up and says, he's not the real Multiple Man. I am. So he splits off. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. They eventually capture Madrox Prime and this Madrox duplicate. Meanwhile, the Madrox Prime, who saw his duplicate get shot, starts going through this really existential crisis because he said, oh my God, that could have been me. He looks like me. I know it's part of me, but was it really a separate person? You know, he could have had his own desires, his own thoughts. He really gets existential with this. And this is something that we're gonna tie into, because this is one of Jamie's biggest things, his biggest hangups, is this existential crisis over his duplicates and their, I guess, unique ability.
Yeah, you know, it's
individuality is the term I was looking for.
Yeah, it's funny you mention that, because I'm also thinking about this in terms of science ethics. What happens in the future? I'm talking our future, not comic books or anything. When we get more accustomed to the idea of cloning, what type of rights and responsibilities are future generations going to have when they already had them a generation ago?
It's a perfectly valid point. So then they bring in a lie detector test and they say one of you is the real Madrox and one of you isn't. And the one that actually was with the fallen angels and with Siryn says, oh yeah, well, I know everything that happened with the aliens from Coconut Grove because that's the name of the planet. It's a planet like a nightclub, whatever. I didn't come up with it. Siryn goes, oh, that must be the real one because he knows what happened and the other one doesn't. So they absorb, except it turns out that was actually the evil duplicate. But then the Madrox Prime overcomes that and says, now I'm out, but now I've retained all the memories of what that evil dupe did. Because that's how Jamie Madrox rolls. He'll send a duplicate off. Duplicate gets all sorts of knowledge and has a whole separate life experience. And then they get reabsorbed back into Madrox Prime. And Madrox Prime now gains the memories, knowledge, experience, training, what have you, of whatever that duplicate did, which in theory could be a really cool power to have. Just, okay, you're going to go off and you're going to study this and you're going to study that and you're going to do that. And then you will come back and I get to reabsorb all of this knowledge without actually having to do it myself. I think that's pretty kick-ass.
Yeah, that does sound pretty awesome. I could imagine it being overwhelming. And we'll get into that.
Oh, yes, we absolutely will get into that. So then later on, Jamie gets exposed to the legacy virus. And then while he's infected, he's taken in by the goddess as part of the Infinity Crusade. And we've mentioned earlier, the less we say about the Infinity Crusade, the better. Then he dies from the legacy virus, except it's not Madrox Prime. It's a dupe. He creates a dupe and makes sure that that dupe has all of the virus in him and none in the Prime. And then that dupe dies.
That's great to have an extra body as a quarantine space. That is awesome.
Yeah, except the Prime has amnesia, so remembers nothing about this. So then M-Day comes along and Madrox, because he's not a mutant, he's a changeling, he still has his powers. He opens a new X Factor investigations with winnings from a game show that's kind of like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I didn't, unfortunately, get to read all the specifics because Marvel Unlimited doesn't have a lot of the X Factor issues. So some of this I was piecing together from reading other stuff. But I want to know how the hell he won. Doc, maybe you can shed some insight on this.
Okay, so I didn't get a chance to read the full issue either, but I did see a few of the comic panels when I was a part of a forum a long time ago. He phoned a friend, and the friend was him. And it turns out that a lot of the audience was him too, but not the whole thing or anything, so that they didn't catch on. But the point is, he had whatever information he needed at any given time because of the way the dupes work. So, hey, good for him for thinking ahead. We were talking about other characters that don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, if you can take your powers like that and plan ahead and say, okay, in 3 months, I'm going to be on this show. I need all of you to go out and learn as much as you can. And then I need you to be in the studio audience, fill me in, and then reabsorb. And then I will have all of that knowledge that I retained. That's like basically sending someone else out to go do your chores, go take a test for you. At least when I was a kid, that would have been the ultimate superpower. I can sit and play video games and send someone else to go out to school for me. And then they come back and I learn all of the knowledge that they acquired, but yet I don't have to get my ass off the couch and play video games. Where do I sign up for that deal? I'm 36. I still want that. You go to work. I'll send a duplicate out to go to work. You do all the menial, mindless, boring crap, and I'll sit here and play, Mario Odyssey, or, I'll play on the Switch, or I'll just get really good at Fortnite.
If you can't see where there could be potential problems with this, I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, I see the potential problems. Don't worry. We're going to get into that. But, I'm just looking at the awesomeness. Of course, it could turn into, something like Silence of the Lambs. We talked about Silence of the Lambs last week with Hannibal Lecter. And, would you fuck me? I'd fuck me. You could make that happen. Some of Jamie Madrox's dupes have been shown to have homosexual tendencies. It's a situation he could literally screw himself.
I am speechless, as you could tell. This is beyond anything I anticipated for
So
this.
Moving on to the Civil War storyline, Jamie Madrox is both anti-registration, and one of his dupes is an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. who's hunting down the anti-registration protesters. So he's on both sides of the fence. There's a recurring pattern we see with Jamie. He takes both sides because he can. He goes on this mission to reabsorb a lot of the dupes that are out there.
Oh, really? You think that might be a good idea? Just to rein things in just a little bit? I'm sorry, I don't mean to sound so harsh about this, but my goodness, how could you not see that this could create some problems? All right, go ahead.
Well, there used to be a situation where he used to be capped at how many dupes he could create. I think it was 40 or 50. That was the maximum number of duplicates that he could have. But he eventually learned to overcome that. And then it became a situation where some of the dupes were creating other dupes, and it became like a multiplicity thing. A copy of a copy is never as sharp as the original. So I like pizza. That was such an underrated movie. And now Michael Keaton is the Vulture in the MCU. So go figure. And also he was Batman. So he goes on a mission to reabsorb these dupes, but he leaves one of them alone when he discovers that he built his own family. So Father John Maddox, because he changed his name, he became an Episcopalian priest and had a wife. He had a son, and he had this whole life, and he was ready to be reabsorbed. But Jamie said, "You know what? You're your own person. You are completely separate from me. I don't want to take that away from you. I don't want to take you away from your family because of everything that you've built." And I think that was just a good, solid growth moment for Jamie to have, just in terms of his character development. So he left Father John Maddox alone.
But ain't nobody got time for that. We got some action to do. Oh, man.
Okay, so then he discovers one of his dupes slept with Siryn, and the other one slept with Monet St, and they were not happy with him. And he was drunk. The dupe was drunk, but so there's that power perversion potential that you can just send somebody out and go do terrible things. And when that wasn't me, I didn't do it. It was a clone. It was a duplicate. Where do you do that?
Yeah, take all the rewards, none of the punishments. I see. Okay. Yeah, good way to look at it.
So then Layla Miller and one of the Madrox dupes end up going into the future, and they end up in Bishop's future, which is just a bad place to be. And then here's the thing that I didn't understand is the dupe gets the M-style tattoo, and Madrox Prime gets the tattoo. It's a weaker version, but he ends up with it. That's not usually how they work.
All right, they were, I think, inconsistent with this. Sometimes him reabsorbing one of the dupes was more of a healing process, and other times he would take on the physical pain and other characteristics. Which happened at which time? I don't know. But hey, that's storytelling.
Yeah, that's left up to the writer. I do know that he had sort of a telepathic link with the dupes, that they could, I don't want to necessarily say communicate with each other, but he knew what was going on with the dupes and he knew where they were. And if he reabsorbed a dupe that had an injury, he would feel the injury, but it would be less than whatever the dupe was feeling. But for him to get the scar, the tattoo, whatever, on the side of his face when the dupe had it, I didn't really know how that worked. Anyway, so then Siryn, who at this point he's been in a relationship with, she gives birth to a son with Jamie, and the baby's name is Sean. They give Sean to Jamie, and he holds him, and he absorbs him.
Whoops.
Nobody saw that coming. He absorbs his own son, which now freaks him out, understandably so. And I'm pretty sure that was going to piss off Siryn as well, because she just carried that baby for 9 months and went through the excruciating pain of labor for a child that is no longer there. So she literally went through all of that for nothing. So that's going to have an impact on her as well. But this turns Jamie just plain old suicidal. On a side note, this is also when he discovers that John Maddox's son isn't biologically his. And he goes to confront John Maddox about this, and he goes, yeah, my wife cheated on me, and I know it's not mine, because if he were a dupe and I touched him, or if he were a son of mine and I touched him, I would reabsorb him. And that's when I knew he wasn't actually mine, which is a horrible thing just from a psychological standpoint, to know that you can never father children. You can never have a kid, because as soon as you touch the kid, it's going to get absorbed into you.
Yeah, and then to actually find out that way that that's the truth.
Yeah, that's the other thing, to find out that the kid that you thought was yours isn't. There's just it's a mind screw all around.
It's almost as if we can discuss that as one of the issues. Foreshadowing. Then
in the Summers Rebellion storyline, this is an alternate future where there's a whole bunch of mutants. They're fighting against mutant oppressors, and one of the leaders is the child of Cyclops and Emma Frost. So she's got the eye beams and the diamond skin. I think that's how it goes. So in this alternate future, there's an agent of the government who's trying to put down the mutant rebellion, and this agent is called Cortex, and it's revealed that Cortex is, dun dun dun, a Madrox dupe.
Lovely. It's almost as if every time he decides to let one of them go, they go off on random adventures, and it's going to have massive consequences throughout the rest of the universe.
Yeah, it doesn't always work well. There's one instance where it does work well. Yes. I think it works well, and we're going to get to that in a sec. So Jamie gets killed by Bloodbath, and then he ends up in this alternate reality where he's killed again, but he's sent back to the main reality by the spirit of Doctor Strange, who was also simultaneously dead, because Doctor Strange was dead, but had enough power within his spirit to be able to use his magical astral realm, whatever powers, to send Jamie Madrox back to our reality.
Another part of that story is when he gets brought back to our reality, some of the other villains from those other realities came with him, because, you know, you have to have someone to fight for these stories to really be worth reading. And they win. So, you know, good job, I guess. And I'm not exactly sure how a dead Doctor Strange versus a live Doctor Strange matters when all of his powers are based on the astral plane, which doesn't require a physical presence. Okay, you know what? I realize this tangent could go on for hours, so let's move forward.
So one of his other duplicates is known as Madrox, and this is one that I love, Madrox, because I'm a big fan of the She-Hulk run written by Charles Soule, where the character was created. So Madrox is a Madrox dupe that went off to study law school, became a lawyer, and is this now really high-powered, jet-setting, high-flying, limousine-riding, kiss-stealing, wheeling-dealing son of a gun, woo, that is a hotshot attorney that Madrox Prime allows to go off and do his own thing. And he sends half of the money that he makes to Madrox Prime. And he's like the slicked hair, the tan, the sunglasses, you can really just picture him as this big plastic person. He's a real human being, supposedly, but he's just like, you know, that fake plastic type of person. Like, hey, how you doing? That's who Madrox is. And he's an attorney, and he ends up helping She-Hulk when she's trying to defend Steve Rogers. Again, I loved this arc, because anything written by Charles Soule, particularly if it's an attorney character, whether it's Daredevil or She-Hulk, Charles Soule is an amazing writer. And because as an attorney, I can appreciate when he's writing with authentic legal knowledge that he gives to the characters that are attorneys. And he can write what it's really like to be a lawyer. Everybody likes to think being a lawyer is like Law and Order. It's not. It is 99.9% of an attorney is nothing like Law and Order.
Are you trying to say that they dramatize an occupation for the sake of people's entertainment?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Who would do such a thing? I mean, to really try and benefit using true professional experience for the sake of others' entertainment? I'm not sure I could be on board with that.
You mean someone just goes on the internet and tells lies? Just picturing that clip from Arthur. But so Madrox Prime, he says, you know what? I've had it. I'm just going to go live on a farm with Layla. We're just going to go kind of do our own thing, be by ourselves. So he ends up going back to Muir Island because he's going to investigate the impacts of the Terrigen mists on the on mutants. And this is during the Inhumans versus X-Men storyline, because I think we mentioned this in a prior episode. Marvel was like, hey, we own the rights to the Inhumans, but not mutants. So let's kill off all the mutants and push and force the Inhumans down everybody's throats, which resulted in that really, really terrible TV show. But I don't want to get into that. So Madrox Prime gets infected by the Terrigen mists and he dies. And then Jamie and all the dupes get buried on Muir Island. And that's kind of the last time we saw Jamie Madrox. Now, I don't know if this means Madrox died as well, which would make me really, really sad, because I'm hoping somewhere out there that Madrox is still being the lawyer equivalent of Poochie. I don't know. That's how I envision him. He's a kung fu surfer from, what was it? I don't know. He's part Fonzarelli, and I don't remember the whole Poochie intro song, but
wow.
When Madrox is not in an issue, all the other characters should be saying, "Where's Madrox?"
Kind of like this podcast, huh? Okay.
I have to go now. My planet needs me. That was a long Simpsons segue. I'm sorry. I couldn't help it.
Clearly.
So that's I think enough of the background for Madrox. Let's talk about the issues. One of the things that Jamie has to deal with, by virtue of the fact that he can create multiple duplicates of himself. And I mean, we mentioned a couple of them, and there's been countless others. One's that study Russian. One was at the Royal Shakespeare Company. One was a Buddhist monk. He can do whatever it is that he wants. Because of that, he has problems with his identity and who he is. Because when he absorbs the dupes, or alternately, when he sends the dupes out into the world, what is he? Are they separate? Are they their own person? Where does that come into play? How does that work? Because who is Jamie Madrox? Normally, you and I, we are the sum of our experiences. That is key to our identity. And it's tied into everything that we've gone through and everything that we've experienced. Jamie Madrox has experienced hundreds of lifetimes within his own. He's experienced myriad things that he, the physical person, may not have, but a duplicate of his has, and he reabsorbs them. How do you reconcile your identity under those circumstances? And what impact does that have on your psyche?
That's an impressive balancing act, because as I've already hinted at in some of my rants during the description of the character, either you are going to naturally want to take all of the successes and attribute them to yourself, and you're going to want to deflect all of the blame for negative consequences and say, well, that was the dupes. It's just a natural thing for human beings to do. That's our state. The problem, of course, with that is you make yourself out to be infallible, and we know that's not possible. So at some point, you're going to end up with this existential crisis. And he had it actually very early. He knew that once he physically felt what one of the dupes felt when they were shot, that's pain. But not just the physical pain, that's suffering. That's the idea that things are finite, even in an infinite construct. I don't mean to be paradoxical there, but it is what it is. He starts to recognize that he needs to draw a line somewhere. And that's why I basically, reading the comics, cheered when he was looking to reabsorb all of these other characters, because he needs to take charge of whatever is happening. He needs to be in more control. I understand that it's a fantastic power, but he needs to delegate. He was doing that fine at first, or at least it sounded fine at first. But as you've already pointed out, if he has this connection with these dupes, how does it fade? How does it get to the point that they end up in other timelines and other parts of the world dealing with supervillains, and he has to hunt them down? This is stuff that should already be under control, and it's not. So in a way, maybe it's not him. I can understand that. But it may not have been his fault, but it sure as heck is his problem. He needs to own up to it, and he needs to draw the line. Where that line is, that's not for me to say. After all, it's a very special power, and it's done a lot of good. There's no question about that, which I'll bring up now because I didn't bring it up in the introduction. I find it fascinating that he's portrayed so much as a hero in the comics, but any other iteration I've seen in video games, in movies, he's usually used as a villain. And I guess it's a good juxtaposition to show what he can be as an opponent. But at the same time, I'm glad that we were able to focus more on the comics because he's struggling with the idea that he can do what he wants when he wants, but then has to rein it in. And I think we all can relate to that. The idea that sometimes you're going to have, we like to talk about forks in the road. We're going to have multiple directions that we can go. And we don't always know which road to take. But thankfully, our brains only have to make one choice at a time. And that's what we do. Often we call ourselves multitasking. Not exactly. We're task switching. We're still only doing one thing at a time. It's just that we're able to move fluidly between one task and another. Jamie doesn't even have that luxury. He has to do multiple tasks at once and give up a lot of that autonomy. It's not that different than raising children, except you don't get the choice to raise them. They are already the adults and they're already going out in the world.
Yeah, I was going to say that ties in well with the next issue. And this is something that I know, at least when Matt was mentioning to me why he wanted us to talk about Jamie, it wasn't a question per se, but it was the notion that Jamie suffers almost from a paralysis by analysis in that he has an inability to make a decision because he can make every decision. He can split off and say, I'm going to do this and not do this and see what happens, and then reabsorb himself. It's like the Philip K. Dick story, The Golden Man, where he can see, I forget how far it is in advance, and he can see the result of all of his decisions. And they made it into a movie with Nicolas Cage. I forget what it was called. It was terrible. But, you know, he can see, okay, well, if I do this and this and this, then this is going to turn out bad. So this is the one area, and he can foresee all of the different futures. Just like Doctor Strange, I can see, 200 however many billion infinite possible futures. How many do we win? One. So he can see all of the options and then reabsorb. But as a result of that handcuffs him because, well, what do I do? Do I do this or do I not do that? It's incredibly difficult to conceptualize for us as people who, as you said, we can only make one choice. We either do something or we don't do it. This is the notion of there are infinite timelines and infinite possibilities sprouting out of every decision that we make. Think about how many decisions you make on a daily basis. Think about just something as simple as going straight or turning right, or going straight, turning left and turning right, or not going anywhere at all. You could make all of those decisions, but you have to ultimately make one of them. Jamie makes all of them, and by extension, he makes none of them. What impact does that have on the psyche? And is it possible for you to even discuss that, given that it's such a difficult notion for the human mind to consider?
I feel like we should call in a mathematician for this one, because I think physicists and mathematicians have a greater handle on how our universe or universes, depending on who you talk to, work. So I'll admit that might be a little above my my scope of expertise. And I'll admit, I don't think I can quite process that. Having said that, I can hypothesize how that could affect someone. If every choice is already made, then you've already played the game. You've done everything. You have the 101% score. What's the point then? You shut the computer off, you get rid of the program and move on to something else. Of course, we're talking about his whole life, so it doesn't quite work that way, although he has considered that. So I think that could lead to someone becoming incredibly fatalistic. It's not a matter of what the different choices are or what the consequences are going to be. It's knowing that everything that's going to possibly happen will. To me, the way you can kind of combat that, and I'm not talking about specific treatment, is the idea that, do we know that? I mean, even if that's the case, for example, people talk about spoilers in movies and books and literature and all that stuff. I'm one of the rare people, I think. I don't care. I will read ahead of time what happens in a movie, go, that's fascinating. I wonder how that looks on screen, then go see the movie and still have a great response. I'll admit my response might be a bit more amplified if I didn't know what was going to happen, but I still get fascinated by, okay, I didn't expect them to do it that way, even though I read what was going to happen. So I still want to be involved in that. I still want to have that experience. I want every step of the way, even if I know what the steps are. That's okay. When I'm exercising, I don't say to myself, well, I know I have to do 40 minutes, so that's what I have to do. Why don't I just fast forward 40 minutes? No, I actually put in the effort because I want the result. It's okay to go through that, to experience those multiple things. In his case, he has to give himself permission, and I know this sounds counterintuitive, although he has to delegate and properly control what's going on and have a system in place that's going to allow him to manage it on a scale that a human being could process. It's okay to have this idea of trying different things at different times, because you can get systems as complex as you need them for the sake of what you're doing. If he already knows, as you said, if he already knows where to go on a map the first 3 turns to get to a certain destination, maybe he needs to think differently about what kind of map he's using. Are there roads that haven't been paved yet? Are there opportunities for how someone else that he's created as a dupe to do things slightly different than what he would have done as Prime? It's okay to look at these other possibilities within possibilities and move forward from there. That's my guess. That's my supposition, because I can't imagine doing this as one person. And to me, that's actually freedom. I love the discipline that I can just make one choice at a time. The idea that I have to make every choice at once, forget it. Forget it. I can't do that. Not possible. We plan ahead. We do. But we also recognize that plans change based on different events that happen outside of our control. He actually has the ability to start influencing the other things that in theory were out of his control and make them in his control based on where he places other people. That's a rare responsibility. That's the thing that only great men of power get to do. And even then, they don't get the experiences of those other people. It's not as if that, they may get some information, but they don't actually go through it. He's quote unquote gone through it. Once again, mind blown, way above my pay scale. I don't know if Neil deGrasse Tyson wants to take this, that's up to him.
Well, we can ask him. He's pretty active on Twitter. I don't know that he'll necessarily respond, but, it's not the location of the night sky in Titanic or anything. So I don't know if it's important enough to warrant his attention. So the last thing I want to talk about, and I don't know that this necessarily qualifies as an issue per se, but I think it's something that has an impact on his psyche, is, as we mentioned earlier, he cannot father a child because it will get absorbed as a duplicate. And I don't say this as an attack on people who are unable to have children or who are sterile for one reason or another, or who choose not to have children, because certainly I understand that everybody's situation is different, but you can't deny that that still has an impact on your psyche, particularly going through the scenario with Sean, because we know it already happened. And the fact to go through that, to experience the joys of seeing your child born and then to have it handed to you, what can you even talk about that?
I can, and I will, because we go from the theoretical and esoteric to something that hits thousands and millions of people over the course of their lives. I didn't think I was going to say it this way, but the way it's hitting me right now, I think I will. On the side of not being able to have children, I think that's something that everyone can at least conceptualize, because aside from the biological nature for people to want to procreate, want to have children, want to have a family, raise someone, adoption's an option. It's something that comes up. But the idea that there's something you would want more in life than anything and you can't have it, That's painful. But also what you touched on and what I think is something that leads to strong emotions no matter what is the unexpected death of a young child, be it a newborn, be it a stillborn, miscarriage, abortion, so many variations, premature children in the ICU. I've seen it within my family. These are the types of things where many people will question, is life fair? And honestly, that's what he goes through. That's something that can't be explained away. I don't have a good answer for it. But the one thing that I will say is that thankfully, as human beings, we have the opportunity to continue to look to do the best we can under the circumstances, especially when we're talking about a child. That means that there are two people involved. And you still need both of them, even when the child's gone. You need them together now more than ever. And I'm not saying that the relationships have to stay. I realize people get separated, people get divorced, all that. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying that it's a good idea when both people experience that. You mentioned it. Siryn carried that child. Jamie didn't. But that doesn't mean Jamie didn't have an experience of anticipation. And for that to be ripped away the way it was, first of all, the comic version of that's more devastating than I could imagine. But I've actually been in the room where I've had to witness a child that did not survive in a mother's arms. And it's something that just makes you realize that life is incredibly precious. And once again, and I'm not going to call this the boring part, I'm going to call this the important part, the practical part. You need someone there with you, I think. You may need time alone to process things, I get it, but in that moment, you need someone to remind you what the world is about, because you just may forget.
Beautifully said. I don't think I could have done any better. Yeah, take a moment. It's perfectly all right. And I think just the notion of loss is not something that's discussed as often as I think it could or should be, because I think there's still the stigma that somehow it's the fault of the parents, at least in a real life scenario. I'm obviously not talking about the comics at this point. In a real life scenario, there's still this unfortunate stigma that it's somehow the fault of one of the parents. Usually it falls upon the mother, that if the child didn't survive for some reason, that somehow it's the mother's doing, or it's something that the parent did. And in very rare circumstances, I know there are instances where it is, a direct result of something that one of the parents chose to do. But in the vast majority of cases, it is completely outside of the control of either of the parents. And to bring it home, I know that my sister had several miscarriages before my niece and nephew were born. It's something that happens very, very frequently, but it's not discussed. And I think that's something that we can certainly do to destigmatize in this time where everybody wants their hashtag moments, and everybody wants to destigmatize things, and everybody wants to bring forward all of these formerly taboo subjects. I think this is something that has been having some surgence in discussion, but it's still not at the point where it's fully talked and accepted. And it was beautifully done in a This Is Us episode. So again, just the notion that to bring it back to the topic, the notion that losing a child is very traumatic for both parties is certainly very, very real. And the fact that Jamie had to go through this, and then for him to go on this journey where he was, because that's what led to him going out and trying to find all the dupes in the first place, was after this, he went suicidal and he was trying to find all these other dupes because he was trying to find himself again. That's a very powerful thing. And I think that there's a lot of people who can certainly relate to the notion of losing a child. And also the notion of who am I really and trying to find yourself. Now, of course, he goes about it in a completely unique fashion because of his powers, but that is still something that is very real and very relatable for people to go through. So that definitely has an impact on your psyche. And I think they handled it pretty well in the comics.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I think they did a good job just first of all, conveying the emotion, the intensity of that moment, as well as the potential reactions that a person could have. And what ended up keeping him going? Someone that cared about him, reminding him, don't worry, you're still who you are. Whatever that is, we'll figure it out, but there's someone there for you.
Yeah. So as we do sometimes, we get a little heavy. So, but now we take those issues and now we look at the treatment. So starting first with the treatment of Jamie Madrox in universe, what would you say to him, given that, again, he can go through this? There may be a dupe of him that's already a psychiatrist that already knows all of these things, who went through the training. Lord knows he's gone through medical school and he's gone through law school, and he could have had somebody go and become a psychiatrist. But what would you say to Jamie Madrox in universe?
Well, first of all, and I know this sounds like a non sequitur making it light, but that's not really the point. I'd find that original suit, the one so that he didn't have this happen so much. I know he's in much better control, but I'd want to be able to get him, just him, one-on-one, not the multiples. Find that suit again, because it would allow me to give him a hug. Now, I'm not saying that as a professional. I'm saying that as a human being that has seen situations like that happen. So if we're talking about that particular event, there's no such thing as being the perfect therapist or psychiatrist or psychologist or personal counselor or social worker or anything of the sort. You're a human being first, and you let them know that they have people that care about them. And it's a shame when anybody has to go through those situations. Now, to get to the other parts about the identity and everything else, I'd actually be pretty open with him. I would allow him to forgive himself for, at times, what he would likely perceive to be mistakes. If he's blaming himself too much for something a dupe did, well, okay, that's difficult to rein in. I can't imagine having to do that all the time and keeping track of everything. You're gonna make mistakes. It's fine. If it's more, well, is it really me that's doing this? Well, if he's resorbing them, if they're coming back, I'm actually reminded of that old saying, if you love something, let it go. If it comes back to you, it's yours. So that's okay. Now, I'll admit some of them were forceful. I'm not going to deny that. But at the same time, some of them had to be forceful. It's better for him to be able to maintain that control than to let them run amok. So, good job. I'd basically help him try and create a system that's going to work for him to keep things in balance. Whatever he decides that balance is, I don't think I'd be able to determine what the balance is, because I have no experience with what his powers are and how many of these are any given time. At one point, I think it might have been with Sinister, but basically there became the cult of the Madri, like literally just, I think it was a cult that worshipped Apocalypse or something. Like there's a variation on this. He ended up creating like a whole army of himself. That's the worst case scenario. And that's the one, I guess, that ends up being portrayed as villainous. But I think the best case scenario is you have all of these variations with all of their personality quirks. You have Madrox, you have John Maddox, you have these different variations, some of which stay out there as almost like nodes of him. And then you have the rest that are almost like you're fishing. You just throw them out and you reel them back, throw them out, reel them back. Just like this constant back and forth, almost like a gigantic neural network around the world. But instead of looking at it as like this horrible militia, it's much more dispersed and it's actually a positive influence on society as a whole. I think that's as great as he could become. And that's what I would focus on with him. How do we get this system in place so that you do your thing, man, whatever that is, without causing so much damage?
Now, out of universe, is it even possible? How? Because this is another question that Matt had. How would you? I don't know that you could even conceptualize a real person like this by virtue of the fact that his issues are so intrinsically tied to his very unique power set. What, if anything, could you say, aside from just someone who maybe suffers from like a lack of an identity? They don't know who they are, but I don't know that that's necessarily it's an issue, but we all go through that at some point. It's called adolescence.
And I think that's the power of potential. The idea that you can be anything and that gets thrust upon you at some point in life. Adolescence is a great point. College for many people is that time where they start to experiment with what is their true calling in life. If there is a true calling in life, because I'm not so sure that's true for everybody. I'm going to take a variation on a saying. You know how people say, find your passion? I'm not so sure that's the best way to put it. I've heard variations that say, build your passion or take your passion with you, because the amount of effort and energy you do into investigating things you know nothing about can be just as beneficial as things that you inherently seem to like on a superficial level. And therefore you go with it and say, oh, well, that's going to be my whole life. That may or may not work out for you. But if you always put in the energy and the effort, if it doesn't work out, at least you know that that path doesn't work for you. And some of the connections you may make during that path, be it people you've met, people you've worked under, or the failures you've had, and you've able to recount those experiences to other people so they can learn, and the people that learn and become good in that field can reference you to other people. You end up with better results that way than just saying, oh, what am I going to do with my life? I don't know. Where do I go? What do I... And you end up floundering, as opposed to saying, you know what? This path may not work out, but if I put in 100% and I make a genuine effort for a sustained period of time, I'm going to end up further than if I did nothing. That's how you prevent paralysis by analysis. It's not a judgment on skill. It's not a judgment on intelligence. It's not a judgment on natural ability. It's purely what you put in is what you get out. It may not be what you anticipate, but it's still better than where you were before. So that's the way I would approach it, because I can't say if you have multiple people that go out in the world.
Yeah. So, okay. That's, I think, about as real as you can get with that. So let's take all of this and get, well, I guess we're going to start off with one and we'll see where it goes. But let's get one, at least, Jamie Madrox on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Jamie. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hi, Doc.
So what can I do for you?
Have you ever wondered what it would be like if you took a different path?
Sure, I think everyone has done that.
See, here's my problem. I can do that all the time. At any given moment, I can split off and do anything I want to. Be a fireman? Sure. Be a detective? Been there, done that. Learn a foreign language? I can be fluent in any given language within 6 months, if not less than that. And it's me, but it's not me. So how can I figure out what to do if I can do everything?
Let's start from the beginning. When did you first realize this was your situation?
Literally when I was born. There were literally 2 of me after the doctor slapped me. Freaked my parents the hell out. I've never known a life where I couldn't do anything and everything I wanted. Like, you know that Yogi Berra expression, if you see a fork in the road, take it? I can and have every fork every time.
Okay. So what would happen if you decided to leave one stone unturned or one path untraveled?
I don't know, because it's never happened. Like, I'm a walking Schrodinger's cat.
Well, you're in a unique position, aren't you? But then again, you know what? Your lack of choice is a choice.
How do you mean?
Okay. Compared to when you were a newborn baby, how much control can you exhibit over this duplication process?
It's a whole lot more. I mean, it still happens involuntarily from time to time, and then those dupes go off and live entire lives sometimes. And then sometimes they come back, and then I have to reconcile their memories with mine.
So there's a level of randomness to even the fully controlled possibilities. Huh. Okay, and you've allowed some of those choices to continue on without direct intervention.
It's rare, but it has happened. I mean, one of my dupes is living a completely full and happy life without me. He has a family. He's got a job. He's got a life. He's a separate person. I mean, who am I to take that away from him?
Okay, but that's an example. That's one line that hasn't branched off anymore. You know, you made that choice. So that sounds like you've demonstrated a greater sense of restraint than you really were first telling me.
Well, I mean, one choice out of millions, if not billions, I'd hardly call that great odds.
Okay, let's ration this out then. What happens if it becomes 2 or 3 or 300? I mean, look, I don't care the number. You know, it's never going to be perfect.
Now you're getting me confused. It's just, oh God, I just wish I could figure this out. Uh-oh.
And this just became a group therapy session.
Whoa, where did you come from? Oh, great. This is not the time. All right, get back here. Wait a minute. Who said I wanted to go back? All right, let's not do this, me. No, you listen to me, me. You made the choice to make me. Yeah, and I can undo it just as easily. I just made you by accident. Yeah, but I'm here now. I mean, don't I have the right to live a life separate from you? No, you don't. Says who? Says me.
Sounds like you've made your decision.
Yes, but he won't come quietly. What about John, huh? What makes him different? What? John gets to live a life alone from you. You let him be. He has a family. Who's to say I won't get one too? I mean, you haven't even given me a chance to set up yet. It's different. Why? Because you didn't know about him until it was too late? I mean, how's that fair to me? Or to any of the other ones you've absorbed since then?
Look, sometimes he has to make difficult choices.
Stay out of this, Doc. This is between me and me. Look, give me a year. 1 year away from you to see if I can make this stick. 1 year to make my own mistakes and see if I can do this. And if it doesn't work, I'll come back. What if you do something horrible and it creates a bigger headache for us? Then I'll come back even sooner. But you need to let me do this.
Aww, it's like an adolescent trying to sow its oats.
You mean me? Look, I know I was just made, but I also carry all of his experience before this.
Sorry, I've just never been in this situation before.
So what do you say? 1 year to give it a shot? Fine. You get 1 year. But I'm going to be back in exactly a year to see how you're doing.
Not that I'm condoning this as a psychiatrist, but I guess this sounds like an agreement?
Yeah, put her there, me. I think that went pretty well.
Yeah. I really hope things work out well for them, him.
How did they not reabsorb when they shook hands?
You know, I didn't think of that in the moment.
A wizard did it.
Oh.
Yes, but what about clearly in the episode when Xena was trying to... A wizard did it. I told you, I'm not Xena. I'm Lucy Lawless.
Oh, dear.
It's another Simpsons reference.
Yep.
Great episode. All right, that's going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you, Matt, for choosing Jamie Madrox. At least I think I had a lot of fun with the research as well as the skit and just getting to do this. So I'm very curious to see who you pick for next month. I think Doc had a good time with it as well.
Oh, absolutely. This was a lot of fun, and it allowed us to discuss some significant stuff, which I think is ultimately the goal of this.
Yeah.
Have a lot of fun along the way, and once in a while, maybe we learn something.
Yep. But not too much learning.
Oh, no. If you learn too much, keep it to yourself.
So next week, we're going to do Ra's al Ghul, because I know we had initially intended on doing Scarecrow back-to-back, but then Matt interjected and we said, all right, we'll break up the Batman Begins villains. But next week, we're going to do Ra's al Ghul. And then the week after that, to coincide with the new Fantastic Four series coming out, we're going to do Reed Richards. And that's going to be fantastic.
Oh.
I made that joke last week, I know, but it's a good joke, so I made it again.
Yeah, you're definitely wearing it a little thin with how much you're stretching it out.
Womp womp. Yeah, I know that one wrote itself. I'm not even going to get mad at you for that one. So you can find us on Facebook.com/Capes on the Couch. We have a Twitter account, Capes on the Couch. Our Patreon that allowed Matt to pick this episode, Patreon.com/Capes on the Couch. You can subscribe at the $1, $3, $5, and $10 levels. You can check out our show and all of our pressed episodes at capesonthecouch.live, or you can download it through Google Play, iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, and the iHeartRadio app. For Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.